I know Jerry doesn't like his bio, and he always makes me laugh every time we do this. But I hit Jerry up last week to just kind of do something. He helped Nettleman do a lot of FS prep and that kind of stuff, and so some of the stuff he figured out over the last couple of years of some of the pitfalls of those taking the exams, and maybe some of the class or some of the questions and stuff that were being missed. So it was kind of a general conversation of what can we do to get organized for either CST exams or FS. And one of the ones that we try to push as well would be taking the CST exam before you take your PS exam. One, to just train your brain, learn to take 4 hour exams or 6 hour exams, that kind of stuff. So use them as a precursor to even sitting to take your FS as well. So it just helps before you go take a 6 hour FS exam, taking some of these CST level ones or even level twos. It just helps with that testing side. So Jerry graciously said he would help put some stuff together. Wrangler one puts together some of our CST stuff in our office. Rob took the PS and the FS last year, so he's got some recent knowledge, but he's got to leave in about 20 minutes. So we were just kind of throwing together a whole little panel discussion ish, and led by Jerry, of course. But so that was kind of the precursor for tonight's conversation, everybody. So I love it as always. Jerry's always a
Okay, well, what
helpful
I'll do
man.
yeah, I put together a PowerPoint and stuff with
Yep,
a bunch of suggestions and that type of thing. And
you're good to go.
actually, some of the stuff that I developed over working with Nettleman and over the years,
Yeah.
because I got involved with CST, um, but before Mark Chavez with the Learn CST website, they actually adopted a lot of my material off my website to use for some of the training that they do. So I've been kind of bouncing around the peripheries of this for a while. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and I've got suggestions, and anybody who wants to chime in or add things, so please, chime in with respect to it. I'm not an expert at this. I've just been at it an awful long time. And if you're at something long enough, they eventually start to think you know what you're talking about, whether you really do or not. I mean, but when you get old like me, then you can start to have a sad look on your face and people feel bad about picking on you and stuff. So they'll believe anything I tell them. So let me fire this puppy up. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be good.
Let me get my thing started up here first. I have a whole bunch of screens here. It's like being at a multiplex here in my office. Okay, so share screen. And let's see, PowerPoint slideshow, share. So everybody sees my slide there?
Yes, sir.
Ah, right. Okay. For those of you that don't know me, because I do see a lot of new names here tonight, my name is Jerry Mahun. I'm up in Wisconsin, and we're supposed to be getting another 4 inches of snow later this week. After it was 60 degrees out the other day.
It's a
Uh,
second winter.
I, yeah, I've taught all over the place, worked for the BLM, NGS, DOTs, and all that kind of stuff. I've got quite a varied background in that type of stuff. I am licensed in Wisconsin. I only have one license, unlike a lot of people have got multiple licenses. I found that having a license is like a wife. One is more than enough to keep me busy. So, but I do have a background in education. I've been in education since 1970, 79. It's been a long time. And as Trent was saying, last couple of years here, I was working at the very recently for NLC Prep. I actually rewrote their entire FS review course to update it to the latest specifications for the FS exam that came out a couple of years ago. And I've dealt with doing support with students, answering questions, helping them interpret the results of the exams, putting together study plans and that type of thing. And we had literally hundreds of students from all over the country and some of the outlying territories and that. So it's quite a variety of questions and perspectives I had working with all these different people. I kind of picked up a few things along the way. There's my email, my telephone number. If anybody has any questions on this or the PS or the CST exams, please feel free to contact me. I've retired for a third and final time, so I have all this free time on my hands now. I do have a website, my open access website, which I actually referred to tonight. If you haven't been there, please go there. I put all my presentations and stuff up there, as well as have my library there, as well as some software. And that little cartoon I put on there, surveying for the exam is like drinking from a fire hose, is a lot more true than one would think. If you haven't done this yet or gone through the process, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. When you look at what the specifications are for the exams and what it covers, there's an awful lot of stuff that you're responsible for. All right, so we're going to kind of look at this generically. From the FS and the CST side of things, I'm not going to get into the PS. That's a little bit more advanced. That's after you get a couple of years of experience under your belts. But initially, the fundamentals of surveying and a certified survey technician, because there's multiple levels for them. We'll just kind of look generically at what some of the background format for that stuff is. Now we'll look in general about how to go about preparing for or getting set up for prepping for the exam and trying to avoid some of the pitfalls. First of all, and again, nces.org, and I do have on my website I have a page set up for this. So all the links I'm going to refer to in here are on that page. So you can just click on there and go to all these different places and stuff, go all these different resources that I'll have identified here, just quite a few of them, as opposed to trying to write all this stuff down. And this PowerPoint is up there also. Certified Survey Technician is run by the NSP, National Society of Professional Surveyors. It is not a licensing credential, it is a certification, so don't get the two confused. It's actually like two parallel career paths that they support. There's some overlap between them, at least initially, but the FS and the PS leads to the professional licensure, which is more the managerial side of things. The CST is more the technical side of the issue, although you can work your way up through office manager and that type of thing. They run in parallel and they support each other. But there's a lot of people that take both of them because it does give you another credential. And anytime you get another credential as a CST, that gives you additional perspective and job opportunities and that type of thing, particularly since the license is tied to a jurisdiction, but the CST is not tied to a jurisdiction. That's a national program. So that's applicable in any state and jurisdiction you go to. And I'm not sure I'm sure it's probably true out in the western part of the country. In Wisconsin, we're very high up on the CST program. We offer the exams at the annual institute, and the Surveying Society picks up part of the application fee for the first-time applicants form and stuff like that, because they want to get more people involved in that process. So, all right, anyway, so that's the spiel on that. So the first thing you need to do is, regardless of which exam you're going to take, is to learn the rules. And the rules consist of things like, what does the exam cover, topic-wise? What are the rules on the reference material that you can have available for you while you're taking the exam? Because it's different for both of them, the PS or the FS and the CST. What is the calculator policy? And that is the same for both of them right now. But if you walk in with a calculator that doesn't fit the description that's on that calculator policy, because it by name identifies which calculators you can't have in there, they won't let you bring it in. You'll be without a calculator and that type of thing. The application process and the fees are associated with that. And then also something that people don't pay attention to until maybe too late is any of the complaint or the follow-up policies that come with that stuff. Because some people have complained to me when they've taken the exam and not passed it. Well, I don't think the question that they had on there was right. They had this question, they had these answers on there, and all this kind of that and all this kind of crap. I don't know. I don't see those questions. So I'm not the right person to complain to about that. It's the people that administer the exam that are the ones that you have to redress those types of situations, that type of thing. And by the way, You basically, I'm not sure about the CST, but I know that for the FS and PS exam, you're basically signing a non-disclosure agreement with them. So that you cannot discuss specific questions with anyone. So when somebody starts talking to me about the exam, I don't want to know the specifics of the questions that they were dealing with. Conceptually, I can talk to them about stuff, but I don't want to talk to them about, well, on this exact question they said this is, okay, that I don't want you to violate your non-disclosure agreement, have an ethical violation filed against you before you get a chance to pass the exam and that. So, but be aware of what the complaint and the follow-up procedures are with respect to some of that, if you do have a question on things. And because these are very heavily administrative organizations, they move very slowly to address some of these things. So don't expect that I call in today, I'm going to get a response right away. First of all, let's look at the FS. And there are some things you should go to the website. If you haven't done so already, go there and download. You don't have to have an account for some of these things, but some of them you do. The account is free. It doesn't commit you to anything. But get the examinee guide. That's one thing that most people don't look at too closely. They look at some of the other material I'm going to talk about here, but the examinee guide basically gives you all the information about the administration, the application, and all that kind of stuff with respect to all the NCEES administered exams. Now, NCEES stands for the National Council for the Engineering Examiner and Survey. They do engineering exams as well as surveying exams. So they do chemical, civil, electrical, they do structural, they do all these exams and stuff. They have the exams for the engineers and exams for the surveyors, but they use the same general rules for everything as far as what you can bring in, calculators that you can use, and that type of thing. So look through all that, and it does identify the complaint process in there, but it also shows you the sample diagnostic report. This causes the biggest amount of confusion when somebody takes the exam as to how they did. Because it used to be that you would take the exam, you'd have to get 70% of the questions right to get a passing grade. Okay? That was in the old days of paper exams when everybody took the same stinking exam. It's not a paper exam anymore, it's a computer exam. And what they have is pools of questions. And what happens is on the fly, it creates this exam by pulling out of the pools of questions so that you could be sitting next to somebody else taking the exam at the same time, and they won't have the same exam that you do because of the questions that get pulled randomly. So rather than having a strict 70% passing rate, they have what I refer to as a voodoo analysis, where they explain it. I've read it a couple of times, and I just for the life of me can't exactly figure out how that works. And coming from a guy that's got some advanced graduate school studies behind him and a lot of math classes and that, it's still kind of interesting, try to figure out all that stuff. But basically, when we talk about the knowledge areas, there are a number of knowledge areas, and you're given how you performed in that knowledge area with just a bar graph compared to everybody else within that area that took that same exam. But they may have different questions and stuff. So it's not like, well, you're just below the average, but how much does that mean that you missed, that you didn't get? It's confusing as hell. It's an indicator. If you're extreme on one end or the other, it's easy enough to figure out what the hell's going on. But when you're in that borderline area in between, it's a little bit more difficult. But read through that so that you kind of understand a little bit of what's going on there. The FS exam specifications is the other document you should download. And it explains to you the exam. It's computer-based. It's 6 hours, 110 questions. And that includes a tutorial and stuff on how to do stuff, breaks and all that kind of things. And here's the important part. There's 7 knowledge areas, and I refer to them as KA. And those knowledge areas there's only 7 of them. Say, well, 7, that's not a whole hell of a lot. But within those knowledge areas are anywhere from 5 to 15 subject or title area subtopics in there that fall within that category. You're kind of responsible for that. So it'll identify for you what those knowledge areas are, and then it'll tell you how many questions potentially can come out of that knowledge area that'll be on the exam. So in this first one here for surveying processes and methods, 16 to 24 of the 110 questions will come out of this one here. So they'll randomly pull out of that pool, that up to that many questions out of there. So that gives you an idea of what you need to know. The other thing that you'll need, and this is extremely critical for the FS, is the FS Reference Handbook. And you want to get the latest edition of it now. There's only one now because it came, the old one got replaced last June, so this is the current one. This is the only open book reference that you have for the FS exam. You won't be able to use any of your textbooks or notes or anything like that. This is the only guide that you'll have access to. It's 188 pages long, so there's a lot of stuff in it. And what you want to do is to be sure you're familiar with it and learn its organization and its content. And you got to familiarize yourself with differing nomenclature because it has in it diagrams and equations that you'll need to solve technical computational problems. But if you learn different nomenclature or you're used to different nomenclature, it may take you a while to kind of make the connection as to, oh, okay, that's what this means over here. You don't want to do that during the exam. You want to do that ahead of time so you can get squared away on what all that stuff is. It's divided up into a couple different areas. It starts off with abbreviations and acronyms and conversion factors. And then section 3 is the big section. That's mathematical and surveying related formulas. That goes everything from optics, physics, horizontal curves, vertical curves. There are no spirals on the FS exam, and so on and so forth. So if there aren't any equations in there on a particular type of application, it's not going to be on the exam. For instance, you can look through the entire document and you won't see anything in there on taping corrections. One, nobody does taping corrections anymore. But secondly, if it ain't in the book, it ain't going to be on the exam. So there won't be any taping corrections on there, just like there aren't any spirals on there because it's not in the reference book. So all the equations and diagrams are there. But again, you have to familiarize yourself with the nomenclature. Then there's a section on economics, another section on ethics, another one on safety. And then there's an appendix, and in that appendix are all the standards that you'll need to answer the questions on the exam. There's the NSPS model standards, the ALTA NSPS land title standards, and U.S. National Map Accuracy standards, the FGCS specifications and procedures for barcode leveling systems, which hardly anybody uses those specs, but anyway, they're there. The female elevation certificate and instructions for it, and the geospatial positional accuracy standards. So all that stuff is in their entirety, and those appendices take up probably about 40 or 50 pages of that entire document. So you want to know where that stuff is so you can immediately go to it when it says that you have to have what confidence interval do you have to have for your relative error ellipses for your surveys on a land title survey. You know exactly to go to. It's got to be section 3 of the ALTA ACSM standards. Go to paragraph, subparagraph I. There it is, right there. Pull it out and move on to the next question. That type of thing. So know how that's organized. There are optional things that you can get at NCEES is a practice exam. Those are like $19 for the FS ones. They have 50 questions from previous exams, and they're the same format as the FS exam. So you get an idea what the exam looks like. They do have the worked out solutions in the back, so you can pretend like you're taking a real exam. It's $18.95, which, if you want to invest or not, but they do have a free preview on the website. So when you go to where that is, if you click on that manual, it'll take you to a free preview, and it'll be basically the same document with a bunch of pages missing. So you can get an idea what the questions at least look like and what some of the answers are worked out. Okay. So that's for the FS stuff. Those are the documents you want to have. That practice exam is an optional one, but those other ones you want to get ahead of time and use that as a framework for doing your studying, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. The CST, a little bit different format. Uh, there are multiple levels to the CST, and there are a couple of them where you can enter directly into a specific level without working your way up through the other levels. And there are different tracks within the CST, depending on if you're going an office track or field track type of thing. So there are kind of specializations within that. There are 4 exams. The first 3 level exams are all 4 hours long, and they vary from 200 questions on the first level down to 110 questions on the third level. And then the fourth one is not really an exam, a sit-down exam like the other ones are. It's an essay. You have this essay question that you have to answer, and it's a take home, and you have to do it on your own and that type of thing, and submit it for evaluation or review. And all of their exams are in fact open book. You're not limited to one reference document like you are on the FS and the PS exams. So uh, it's a little bit more flexible in that respect, but you do have a lot of questions in a relatively short period of time. You have 200 questions on that level 1 exam in 4 hours versus 110 on the FS in 6 hours. So you got to be moving. It's not one of these things where you can, oh, I can look that up. You don't want to be looking crap up while you're taking the exam. You want to be able to respond to the questions in that. The thing that you want to download at the CST site is a program book primarily. That one's kind of got a conglomeration of all the information for all the different exams. It goes through what the format is, what the calculator requirements are, and they're the same as they are for NCES. And then they go into each level and describe what that level consists of, typical jobs and that type of thing, experience, and then the work elements that are kind of the equivalent to the knowledge areas on the FS exam that you're responsible for. Okay. So that'll have subjects and topics, and again, the number of questions on the exam for each of the work elements in that. So you have an idea of what your responsibilities are as far as knowledge goes for both the FS and the CST exams, as long as you get the documents and look it over ahead of time. All right, so now that's kind of just the generic stuff with respect to the exams. To approach these exams, whether you're doing the FS or the CSTs, you kind of have a similar type of approach to them. And it all starts off with, what I refer to as a professional library. I think every professional, whatever profession that you're in, should have a professional library. And that's an assembly of publications, primary publications, and reference materials that you can refer to answer questions that you may run into. And they can be real simple publications, or they can be more complex ones and that type of thing. And they're not there just for the exam preparation. You're going to refer to the material in your practice as you go on throughout your life. I used to have like over 800 of books. I just kind of collected old books and all that kind of stuff. And I finally ran out of space. So I boiled it all down to a couple of books that I have sitting next to my shelf, next to my office, in my office here. Yeah, boundary control, legal principles, evidence of procedures and locations, and Waddles, and there's a couple surveying texts, adjustment texts, and I'm constantly pulling these things down because I can't remember all this crap. I can remember stuff from when I was 3 years old. I wish to hell I could get rid of that and use that for more useful information, but I can't. So I pulling this stuff down off my shelf all the time. So, and I'm an old guy, so I'm still dealing with books. A lot of the stuff now is digital, and you don't have to have it in book form. You can have it in digital form that you can flip through on your computer or on your iPad or your smartphone or that type of thing. But the point is you want to assemble, if you haven't done so already, start assembling something like that to begin with. And a lot of the times, your initial seed to that is going to be the textbooks and stuff that you had when you went to whatever academic program you went through. You can have a familiarity with like an introductory surveying textbook or maybe a photogrammetry textbook or some of the legal books that you work with. So these are some of the ones that I suggest having in there that if you haven't got them already, to start looking at building them up. And they don't necessarily have to be the latest editions of books because the technology is moving so fast that if you get the latest edition of a book, it's going to be obsolete by the time it gets delivered to you, even with Amazon next day service type of thing. But basically, breaking up into a couple different categories. For basic principles, you should have a relatively recent edition of a general surveying textbook and a general photogrammetry textbook. Both of those books cover an awful lot of territory. Photogrammetry covers not just photogrammetry, but more current edition is going to get into LiDAR scanning. It's going to get into remote sensing and all that type of stuff that's related to non-terrestrial based measurement systems. And that's changed a lot in the last 20 years. So you want to get something that's relatively recent. General surveying textbook, you probably got one already. There's a couple good ones out there, a couple ones that are not so good in that type of thing, but you want to get a later edition on that type of stuff. Under boundary principles, general boundary principles, there's a couple of them that are the big ones on there. Brown's boundary control and legal principles and evidence and procedures for boundary location. Those you should have. Latest edition or two of those. They get to be expensive when you buy them brand new, but if you wait an edition or two back, you can buy them on used book sites for relatively good prices. Writing legal descriptions by Waddles is another good one to have. And I'll talk about this later on as a resource. But for Wisdom Wednesdays, a book club discussion, we just went through evidence and procedures for boundary location. We finished that as our first book that we discussed, and we're partway through Waddles writing legal descriptions right now. So that's another resource that works really well for you guys that want to learn more about that, get more depth to that type of thing. Clark on surveying is an old traditional type. If you can get a hold of that, that's getting to be expensive, even on older editions, to get a hold of that type of thing. That's why I list that as an optional one. You'll still see that referred to in court decisions periodically, because that's a pretty universal one from quite a while back. PLSS, for those of you in PLSS state, well, if you even not in the PLSS state, you're going to be asked PLSS questions, which may not be fair, but hey, that's what you get for being a first state. Come along afterwards and be part of the modernized public land survey system. But I have two manual surveying instructions. 2009 is the current one, and the 1973 manual is the previous one. And I have both of them listed there because I like both of them for different reasons. There's a little bit of difference between the two, and that's in the definition of, and this is one of the things you got to be careful of on the exam, as to what constitutes a lost, obliterated, and found corner, because there used to be the concept of within reasonable doubt. They've removed that language from the 2009 manual, so that is no longer part of the definition of the corner. So you want to be careful which manual that you're using. But the 73 manual, a little bit more explanation on some of the older technologies that you want to understand, because that's how the surveyors place that stuff. The newer one has got more court decision references in it, citations to explain a little bit why it's done the way it is. Both of those are available in digital form, and I've got links to that. History of the Rectangular Survey System was written by C.A. White, who was a longtime surveyor with the Bureau of Land Management. He started out in archaeology and wound up going up to Alaska and trapping and getting started in surveying up there, working for the Bureau of Land Management. And right when he retired, he wrote this giant book. I don't have it right here, but it's hundreds and hundreds of pages long. And what he did is he went through the history of the land tenure system in the country and then stepped through all the major sets of instructions that came out as the different parts of the country opened up, and talked about what the differences are in the implementation of those instructions. So it's from a research viewpoint for an area. I mean, this is, again, professional library type of thing. If for your area of the country that you may be in and you're doing some research in that, it's a wonderful book to use as a reference for it. I actually was able to get a copy of it when it first came out in print. You can't find them anymore, but they do have a digital version of it. And any previous manuals of instructions from 1855 on forward, those are all in digital form now on the BLM library and the Arizona Library website, so you can get those directly. Let's see, a dictionary. You need a good dictionary. Definitions of surveying and associated terms is put out by NSPS is a pretty decent one. Some of the definitions are a little dated. Black's Law Dictionary, that's the first one attorneys go to pull a definition for a legal term out. And that's the first one you should go to also when you need a definition of a legal term, because that's the way attorneys are going to be looking at and judging that type of thing. That's available in current edition. There is an online version of it. That's kind of an abridged version. I got a link for that, but that's a good one to have. The glossary of BLM surveying and mapping terms is another good one to have, and that's also available in digital form. Not all of those are going to be ones you're going to be using to study for the FS exam or CST exam and stuff like that. But again, this is the nucleus of a good professional library that you can build on as you move towards the future. All right. All right, so exam resources. Okay, other resources that you can have to pick up stuff on the FS exam and the CST exam. Western Federation of Professional Surveyors offers a video course that's taught by Dane Corville and Knut Hermanson. Is that right, Trent? Those
Yes, sir.
guys?
Yep.
And a workbook with it. It's a series of, I'm not sure how many hours of instruction are, but it's tied to the current specifications for the FS exam. That's got for pay. NLC Prep, the outfit I worked with for a couple of years, they offer FS review courses, and they're working on a subscription model now where you don't have to pay for the entire course. You can just subscribe on a monthly basis and just pick up the parts of the courses that you need. There's like, we just rewrote it, and there's like 16 modules to it. So there's a lot of information there. A number of state surveying associations offer review materials and or sponsor review sessions through their organizations. And as I said before, some of them, like Wisconsin, also support the students financially in taking the CST exams to offset the cost and to bring the exam into a convenient area. Every Friday morning at the last day of the annual institute, they have the CST exam given on site there, so students can take it right there. And then Learn CST, one of the other outfits I worked with, that has courses and materials for the CST program. Some of the stuff's free, some of it you have to pay for, and they've got different bundles and courses for the different CST levels. All right, okay, general specialized. Most of these are free unless I've got a dollar sign in front of it. I think there's only one of them here. When I mentioned the introductory surveying textbook, there's a good one that's part of the open textbook library. It's called Surveying and Mapping. The only strange thing about it is it's written by a couple of instructors at a school in the Netherlands. So a lot of that stuff into the GPS and all that kind of stuff is written from their perspective, and that, they're part of the world. But conceptually, all the other stuff that's in it works really well. And I had students at the NLC prep course use that as a reference for some material. The nature of geographic information. If you're not familiar with GIS or you haven't been exposed to it too much, Penn State offers an open geospatial textbook called The Nature of Geographic Information that steps through all different aspects of geographic information systems from ground zero all the way up through geoprocessing. And same for GPS and GNSS. That stuff is progressing so quickly, it's impossible for traditional published textbooks to keep up with that stuff. So the PSU offers also through an open geospatial text outfit the GPS and GNS for geospatial engineers. So again, it's addressed to a broader perspective and that type of thing. But it's one of the better things that I've seen in explaining how GPS operates and how you can use it without going off on a tangent into calculus and all these different orbital parameters and crap like that, you know, that your eyes glaze over after a while, at least mine do. So it's a pretty good way of explaining a lot of that stuff. Open Access Surveying Library, that's my guy. If you haven't been there, please visit it. I do have, it's from years of my teaching. It's all my stuff I've taught over the years on the technical side of stuff. I don't have GPS on there primarily because how quickly that stuff is evolving and that. But it's got everything on the basic calculations, a lot of self-study problems on there also with worked out solutions. So you get a chance to work on problems instead of just looking at problems and that type of. I try to use a lot of color and a lot of example problems to do things. GeoLearn is a relatively recent endeavor that brought together a bunch of different instructors from different areas, and they put together a bunch of video courses. They're very reasonably priced. And again, this not so much for FS type of thing, but there are some FS oriented type of stuff there. It's more like, again, for development, continuing education and that type of stuff, but it's very good website from that viewpoint. The HP 33S and the 35S are calculators that can be used on the exams for both the CST and for the FS and PS exams. And those are the only calculators that are allowed that you can actually program, that you can put programs into. And they specifically don't allow calculators that can communicate externally with anything else. But they don't prevent calculators that can be programmed manually from being used on the exam. So as a result, there's a little bit cottage industry for program software for the 33 to 35S that do surveying calculations. That do a lot, and some of them are relatively simplistic, some are pretty sophisticated. And I have on my website under software HP calculator resources page that lists a couple of different places where there are some software that's available for the HP calculators that you can use. And you'd have to program yourself, but it's pretty straightforward. Minnesota DOT put together a bunch of packages a couple of years ago, and they've got some pretty good stuff in there. There's a pretty extensive library of data that they've got. And there are a couple of others. Al Melbar put together some stuff for an HP 32. That was from, he's an instructor in Wisconsin at one of the tech colleges. I also make reference to on there, there's an HP 35 emulator that you can run on your computer. And what I did is I programmed all the Minnesota DOT stuff for it. So you can download that kernel and run the Minnesota DOT software on an HP emulator on your computer. So you can kind of get used to it. I use that a lot for training purposes when I work for NLC prep and stuff. And then you can kind of get used to it. The tough thing is getting a hold of an HP 35. If you haven't got one already, you're going to have it hard to find them because they just flat out don't make them anymore. And when you do find them, they're pretty expensive. But people swear by them. If you've never used an HP calculator, you want to spend some time learning some RPM before you start working with it on an exam and that type of stuff. It's a trip. It's got to kind of think backward, backwards from the way you're normally used to thinking. Anyway, mentoring Mondays. Here you are. A lot of stuff that's been presented on here over the couple of years. This has been on here. I've been specifically for FS reviews, just specific FS stuff. So go back in the archives, look at the stuff. Dane's done a bunch of stuff on single double proportionate measurement curves and that. I did one on math a couple of years ago. I did one on errors a couple of years ago and that type of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that's already there that's available for free. And Wisdom Wednesdays, Again, the discussions that we're having on the Waddles book now, we had before in the evidence of procedures for boundary location. We go in depth on some of the principles that they talk about in there. That's another way to flesh out some of the stuff they may find confusing on the legal side of things, headed into the exam. The emphasis on the FS exam is not so much legal. It's more the technical side, but you do have to know some basic things like the difference between a simultaneous conveyance and sequential conveyances, what are junior and senior rights, unwritten rights, what are the rules of construction, that type of thing. So we have things like that in the Mentoring Monday archives, but we also discuss them directly out of the evidence of procedures boundary location text. So there's a wealth of stuff there that's available for free. All right, so now, how do you approach this? Whichever exam you're taking. So, let me get rid of this thing because it keeps it. All right. I got this kind of divided up into a couple phases. And this is the way I talk with students when we were working with the NLC prep class. It is the pre-exam. Before you take the exam, you know, if you're starting to think about doing it or getting prepped for it, is you have to identify what you do and you don't know. And that's where those work elements for the CST exam and the knowledge areas for the FS exam specifications are important. You want to go through there and you want to physically mark. And I make emphasis on this. Don't just look at it and say, yeah, I need this study, yeah, I need this study. I want you to take a pencil and lay it down and put a check mark by it and say, every time you do something like that, you're getting actively involved in the process that's reinforcing some stuff in your synapses in your brain and that type of thing. So go through there and indicate which are the things that you feel weak on or are unfamiliar with. And that's going to sort of form the nucleus of your study plan that you're going to have as you approach the exam. Because you don't want to spend time studying on stuff that you already know. You know that. You want to key on the stuff that you're not familiar with or you're forgotten. And you want to be sure that when you look at those knowledge areas, they're not necessarily in the order that makes sense from a learning perspective. For instance, in the very first one, it says surveying processes and methods. The G element in there, land development. The very first knowledge area, land development. Well, you don't learn land development when you first start learning surveying. You go all the way down to the fifth element, down there, surveying computations and computer applications. You learn coordinate geometry, traverse closure, and adjustments, and all that other stuff first that lead up to land development. So you don't want to look at the knowledge areas as this is the order in which I got to learn this stuff or I got to remember this stuff. It's the stuff that you don't know, and then you have to figure out, well, in order to do land development, I got to study up on slopes and for my site grading and that type of stuff, my volume calculations and that type of thing. Horizontal curves, I kind of jiggle my memory as to how those work and all that type of stuff. So there's a process that you want to make. You don't want to just jump in there, start doing land development first, and then horizontal curves later on, and jumping around like that. So look at the viewpoint of how you learned this stuff to begin with. What was the process? Because there's an education associated with this. And the other thing I want you, and this is a tough thing. I'm sorry.
Christina has her hand up. So before you got too far down, go for it.
Hey, Jerry. This is Christina Shaw. I've spent a lot of time in your content, and thank you for creating. It's been very helpful. But my question specifically was about the CST. I'm not familiar with that. Is it free to do the levels, to do the practice questions that you were talking about?
No, to do the exams, no, there's an application fee that goes with it and stuff. But take a look at the material that they have available. Some of the stuff is free for preview and that type of thing, and they do have some stuff that you can purchase for nominal cost. That's some of the old exam questions and that type of thing. And now if you're currently working for an employer,
Yeah.
they might help defray the cost of going through that process if they know that you're getting involved in that type of thing. Because again, it's a certification that's another arrow in your quiver of job specialties and that type of thing. So check with your employer on that.
Wait, and your suggestion on to take the test to check off your knowledge improvement areas on the CST, would you recommend buying it for that purpose?
No, I'm not talking about doing the exam on it. For that one, you've got that booklet that you download that explains each of the levels, and it's got the work elements for each area. What I'm saying is take and look at that list of work elements and step through that and identify those areas that you want to key on that you need to review or to expand your knowledge base on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, which brings this other thing up, and there's a whole lot tied up in this, and this is one of those soul-seeking times. The whole point of what we're doing here and what we've done with on Mentoring Mondays and a lot of the material that we put together for these review courses are that they're for review. They're not for learning, surveying. That's two different processes, two different mindsets and that type of thing. So you have to have yourself honest assessment, like a come to God moment with you and say, do you have the academic background to pursue going for an exam just based on using review materials? Now, review materials to a review survey, not teach it. You should have already been exposed to the bulk of this. There might be some new things here and there, but the basis for that should be stuff that you already know. Now, people don't always look at it that way. And I remember a couple of years ago, you had some of the passing rates at the different states and that type of. What was it for California? Like 20% pass rate?
Yeah, it was as low as like 2% on the state side, but yeah, it's up to upwards of the
and
20s
one of the
now.
reasons, one of the reasons there's because they have no educational requirement. I
Yep.
mean, you can get licensed without any educational requirements. So as a result, you had a lot of people that done some surveying or whatever, and would take the exams, but did not have the academic background for it. So then they turn around and they would take these review courses at NLC Prep and would struggle. They would just absolutely struggle with basic concepts and stuff because nobody had ever taught them this stuff to begin with. So you got to look at the viewpoint is, do I have the academic background to be able to pursue this? Or do I need to back up and take some educational courses in surveying before I attempt to go any further on this? Because it'll make it difficult to pass the FS exam if you don't have that background. And if you do, you'll make it by the skin of your teeth or whatever. You might find out later on with the PS exam, it just gets harder. So you want to be careful that you're at the right level for it. So, and again, I think you get an idea that when you look through those knowledge areas, say, I know absolutely nothing about this. Holy crap, what the hell is all this about? Type of stuff. And when you look at some of those example test questions and things like that, none of this makes any sense.
To your point on that, Jerry, I just pulled up the NC squared reports for 2023. First time overall pass rate for first time takers is a 61% pass rate. Those with a ABET bachelor's, it doesn't specify what their ABET was in, but those first time takers pass rates is 76%. So 15 points higher with being ABET versus, non-educated side going through a college degree program. So
so you got to kind of look at also what your state requirements are, which you want to get licensed, where you want to get licensed as to what the educational requirements are there. And for those of you who will be pursuing multiple state licenses by reciprocity, you got to look at those other states and see what their requirements are, because their requirements might be that if your state isn't as high a requirement level as their state is, you cannot get a license by reciprocity with that state. So you got to be careful on that. So it's one of those, what are my plans in the future and what's the best way to approach this? You're not just keep taking the exam until you pass it. So, again, it's like the question, only 98%. Why can't I be 100% confident? I always throw that question out to students when we talk about errors and stuff. So we get 95% confidence interval. Why can't we ever be 100% confident? Well, we can if we're plus or minus infinity, but that makes absolutely no sense at all. But see, when you talk to a client, they don't understand that necessarily. And somebody that doesn't have the educational background is not going to understand what that means. The biggest issue that we've had with students getting ready for the exams is doing the study time and making a steady, making sure that you've got a dedicated time and location and you're consistent on it. You want to be as consistent as possible because you want to get your brain into that frame of mind that it gives you the ability to review the material, retain the material, and then keep on building with respect to that. We've seen too many people in these review courses that they sign up for the course, and they wait and they wait and they wait. And then right before the FS exam, they try to cram in a whole bunch of studying and learn all at once and then fail miserably on the exam and stuff because they don't retain any of that. Any of that stuff that you learn really fast, really hard like that. Remember, go back to college, think about cramming the night before an exam and that type of thing. You do not retain any of that stuff. What you do retain is everything you get wrong on the exam, but you don't want to learn that way for the rest of your life, So you want to have it so that you don't have too many distractions. And what I really emphasize is, if you've been to my presentations and seminars before, today's kind of an exception. I always give an assignment ahead of time. And the assignment I give it ahead of time is to get people involved in the process, to start thinking about the material and to start to look at it. As long as you get actively involved in the process, you're more apt to learn or more apt to remember. So don't just redo. If you see an example problem and it's worked out for you, you don't learn anything from it. I had one student that insisted I always give her the worked out solutions to all the problems because that's the way she learned. I said, you don't learn by memorizing, you learn by understanding. Okay? So work those problems out. Forcing yourself to do it is that mental reinforcement. And you'll find yourself on the exam going, I remember doing a question just like this one. I remember that. Yeah, so I know how to do that. So that reinforces it. Get actively involved in it. Don't just read. If you are going to use an HP 33 or 35S with software, and you've never used an HP 35 before, a couple of things you got to watch out for is, first of all, most of the programs that are designed for them are written in RPN, even though they can use the algebraic mode. They're written in reverse post notation, which is a different way of working with math using stacks and temporary memories and that type of thing. It's a very efficient way to do calculations, but if you've never done it before, you go crazy looking for the equals key on a calculator because there is no equals key on there. But you got to have the calculator in RPN mode in order to do the software. So if you got to have in the RPN mode, that means your standard calculations have to be done in RPN also. So you're going to have to learn how to do some basic RPN calculations. The other thing is how to set it up. And that's to get the display showing up decimal places, make sure you're in the correct angle mode and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of little things like that. And then the most important thing, if you do have software in there, is how to change the batteries without trashing the software. Because if you pull both batteries out of there at once and put two brand new batteries in there, your software is going to be gone. And you're going to have to spend hours and hours and hours reprogramming that thing again. So you want to learn how to do that correctly. And there's a YouTube videos that show how to do it and that type of thing.
And don't let your batteries die.
Don't let them die. Don't let them. Once they die, that program is gone.
And then you're redoing it all again. So yeah, not
Right.
only is it important to switch out batteries, one at a time, but make sure you don't let them die either.
Yeah. So that's one of the biggest problems we had always with the students also with NLC prep. I changed the battery just like you said. My calculator, the program's wiped out. How do I get the program back in there again? I don't know. It's going to cost you a couple $100, So It's so be careful. I mean, how you, and that's one of the reasons like that emulator. If you get a chance to download that and play with it, you can kind of get used to some of the operations, how to do the RPN and stuff like that. You can't change batteries on it, but you'll see how to do the setup and that type of thing. Develop habits that you'll use on the exam. What you're doing when you're studying is you're developing a systematic approach as to how you're going to answer questions. I always encourage people use sketches where applicable to illustrate narrative problems. There's too many people try to, picture, the thing in their brain when they're reading a bunch of numbers and stuff, and then they wind up screwing things up. Draw a sketch, draw a good sketch and that type of thing. It helps organize your thoughts as well as maybe indicate a solution process that you might not have thought of before. Perform comps neatly so they're easy to follow and or track down errors. Now, that's not be so much maybe necessarily on the exam, but when you're studying and you want to work through a problem, you want to be able to go back to that problem at some point and say, well, how did I do that? And you want to be able to interpret your own handwriting and stuff. That's one of the toughest things to get students in general to learn to do, because in engineering and in surveying, it's extremely important that you document your processes all the way through from beginning to end and that type of thing. And when you get an answer, this is one that takes a while to get the hang of, is you ask yourself if it makes sense. And I always tell my students in my introductory surveying class that they started out making WAGs, and by the end of the semester, they made SWAGs. And they said, what's the difference? Said, well, a WAG is a wild ass guess. At the beginning of the semester, you're making a wild ass guess. At the end of the semester, you're not fully intelligent yet, but you're further along that way. So now you're making scientific wild ass guesses. Okay? So they're making a little more sense. So look at the numbers coming out of there and see if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then something's wrong. If something's wrong, then you're not going to get the right answer. Okay? So look at it. Oh, just because it come out of calculus, it's got to be right. Remember, for the FS exam, you can only use that reference handbook. So get in the habit of having that next to you. So when you're doing calculations, you can refer to the equations and stuff in that handbook also, so you're familiar with where they are and how they work. And also you can go into those indices and know where that material is to know where you got to pull out the particular statistic. The CST exam, you've got your open book and that type of stuff, but you don't want to bring in every single textbook you have or every single book you have. You want to bring in a representative few that are going to help you, what I call a luggable pile and that type of thing. And you want to know where the material, put in little Post-it notes and crap in there. You don't want to spend your time paging through that book trying to find where that particular thing is that you're interested in doing. So knowing where the material is, you spend less time flipping pages and more time answering questions or doing calculations and that type of thing. Okay, it's all about being organized in that respect. Getting more help. If all that stuff, mentoring Mondays, check our archives. I already mentioned that to you. Also, Wednesdays and Wednesdays. And if something's not covered and you think it's beneficial, tell that guy right there, Trent, and then he'll organize somebody. He'll drag me into it, or Dane, or somebody else, and we'll do a presentation on here. Yeah, whoever. Yeah, everybody's pointing everywhere. but we'll put together, and we can put together something relatively quickly on that. So and a lot of people benefit in that type of thing. So we'll see if we can put together something like that. We have a contact spreadsheet for Mentoring Mondays that we started putting together for people to contact you. And I just went in there today and I added another column in there that says, would you be willing to answer questions about the FSPS and CST exams, that type of thing. So that's another thing you can access. And if there's somebody there that puts a yes in there, mine's the only yes in there so far, then they're saying that they're willing to, if you contact them by email or whatever, maybe give you a hand with answering a question, that type of thing. That comes in real handy also with respect to jurisdictional exams, which will be more important to you later on. But having somebody that's familiar with the jurisdictional type of the issues in your particular area. taking the exam. These are hints I've always given my students, whether it's working in an academic environment or taking the FS or the CST exams. A couple of things you should consider as far as approaching this exam. First of all, don't brute force it. And by brute force it, I mean, don't start at question 1 and then bulldoze your way all the way through the exam to the end, hitting every question, answering every one, and getting to the end. It'll take you forever to get through the exam like that, and you're going to wind up missing a bunch of questions there. What I suggest you do is you start at the beginning, then go through the exam relatively quickly, looking at the questions and answering the ones that you can. There'll be some you'll be able to go, yeah, I know what that is, and go on to the next one. That does a couple of things. It gives you an idea of what the content of the organization of the exam is. But secondly, because you know where all that stuff is, on an earlier question that you might be confused, there might be something in a later question that helps resolve that first one. You're going to be sharing that information back and forth across the exam. So if you do that first, kind of get an overall view of what the exam consists of, and then go back and start working through it, I think you find it a little bit, plus it gets rid of any test taking, it doesn't get rid of all, but a lot of people with test taking anxiety, they get really nervous in those situations and that type of thing. This is a way to help alleviate that, because they get through there and say, yeah, I know this, I know this, I know this. Yeah, well, not so much, but I know that kind of stuff. So it's a good way to kind of introduce yourself to the exam. Read each question carefully. I can't emphasize this enough. Sometimes your mind sees something different than your eyes do. And an example I use, and I always throw a question like this on an exam when I give it to my students, simply because I tell them to always read each question carefully. A township is 6 miles square, or a township is 6 square miles. When you first look at that, and again, if your academic background is a little weak, you might say, well, that's the same damn thing. Well, it's not the same thing. When you stop and you look at how those are worded, those are two different things, okay? So read each question carefully to, one, understand what's being asked, and secondly, you wind up doing only what the question asks you to do, not a whole bunch of other stuff, you know? You can do a lot of calculations, and you only might need to do a couple of them just to get the answer that they're looking for in that. So look at each question, read it very carefully. And don't react and start grabbing an answer before you're done reading the question. Don't go halfway through the, I know what to go on and grab an answer and that type of thing, because inevitably you'll be wrong. A tough one is answering non-computational questions based on what was provided, not on how your company may do things. Now, there's stuff on there on economics and on safety, on ethics, and things like that that are very non-computational. And you kind of got to look at how are they asking the question, what is the information that's available in the reference manual, and then use that as a way to answer the question. You don't go, well, the way our company does it is, they don't care how your company does it. They care how it's asked in the context of the material that's provided to you. And for any, your company might not be doing things right, but that's, you know, in our area, we don't. It's always tough as a question writer to write a question on a national exam that can be interpreted the same regardless of where you are. And that's especially difficult with any legal principle type of things. Because I can't tell you how many times I've corrected people that say, you know what, you can't adversely possess against the state. In Wisconsin, you can. So you can't make that general statement, say, well, you can't ever adversely possess against the sovereign. But see, if I look at it from a Wisconsin perspective, then I'm going to get that answer wrong. But if I look at it from a general perspective that they're asking, the general principles, then I'd have to say, yeah, you're right. You can't adversely possess against the sovereign. So be careful with those types of questions. Answer them based on the information that's provided, not necessarily on your background. Don't leave any questions unanswered. No answer gets you no points, okay? And if you find yourself running short of time, if all else fails, remember, you got a 25% chance of guessing right. But in most cases, you can maybe narrow the odds. You can look at them and say, which of the answers don't make any sense in the context of the question that's being asked. throw out the ones that don't make sense. And you go from 25% chance to maybe 50% chance. You know, you increase your odds in that time. If you only got to guess for between two of them, you got a higher chance of getting it right than if you have to guess between four of them, that type of thing. But don't leave any of them unanswered, okay? Because you don't get any points for those guys. If you're done ahead of time, as people do, make sure all the questions are answered. Just don't get up and leave and walk out. Make sure all the questions are answered, and then revisit any questions that may have been difficult or confusing. Not with the intent of necessarily changing them, but to make sure that you feel good about the answer that you did come up with based on what your knowledge is and what's being asked by the question. Okay. And sometimes that's when you'll catch where, wait a second, that's not the way I interpreted it correctly. When you look at it a second time with a fresh set of eyes, basically, you might look at it as a different type of question. So revisit those that you may have been, that may have been difficult or confusing. Okay, and then post exam. I always suggest students do this. After you're done with the exam, summarize your experience. Go through the knowledge areas and the work elements, which exam you're taking, and make notes on it. Actually write things on it. Which ones were difficult? Which ones did you feel totally unprepared for? You just totally missed the mark on them as far as what was on the exam and what you thought you knew coming into them. And those that you felt you were adequately prepared for, that you kind of handled relatively well, okay? Now, man, this is your interpretation of stuff that could be different than from reality and that type of thing. Compare those notes, your interpretation, to the exam diagnostic, which is your actual performance when you receive it. They should be closely aligned. So if you did have a really weakness, say in the development area, first knowledge area of the FS exam, and that diagnostic shows it, then you know that that's where you really got to bone up on stuff if you're going to do it again. You know, or if you said, well, I thought I did really good on this, but it says there I did really bad on it. Well, remember, there's a lot of topics that are covered in there, and you may have done good on one or two of them, but you may have blown it on a couple of others because there's others that are within that topic. So kind of use that to help revise your study plan if you're going to take this again later on. And then finally, decompress. You go through a lot of pressure going through this stuff. Have a beer, play a vicious game of pickleball, veg out on your favorite Netflix Prime Apple, or most importantly, spend some quality time with your family who's taking a backseat to that damn exam while you've been studying for. You know, you missed a couple things with your kids or whatever you've had, Annie, or the wife's been there knocking at the door and you keep saying, go away, go away. She doesn't know if you're studying for an exam or watching porn on the you know, but basically, you want to touch base again with reality at that point, because you know that's you know, decompress at that point. You know, you don't want to drive yourself up a wall with this stuff. If you don't pass it the first time through, it's no big deal. You get a chance to take it again, and you'll be, you know, a little bit more better prepared next time. But remember that when you do take it that second time, because of the way, at least the FS exam, the way they draw the questions out of the pool, you're not going to get the identical exam the second time. As a matter of fact, the emphasis on some of the areas may change. Because I've had students tell me, well, the first time I took it, there was a lot of computational stuff. But the second time I took it, there seems to be a lot of conceptual crap on there and not so many computations and stuff. Well, that's true, but you got to remember the concepts in the computations are tied together. So they don't ask you something that's totally out of left field in both cases. There's some connection between those within those knowledge areas and stuff. So it's still important to understand both the computations and the concepts of those areas.
Jerry, to your point there,
Yeah.
I had the wrong stat earlier. So first time takers with no education was 56% pass rate. First time takers with ABET bachelors was 76% pass rate. The repeat takers on the FS pass rate drops to 36%.
And that makes absolutely no sense at all when you're a repeat taker.
Yep.
Why you would have, I don't know.
Yep.
Unless you reach that point where you think that, well, the only things I got to study are the things that I think I missed. And you wind up totally missing the boat on some of the other stuff that you really didn't study and bone up on, and you didn't get hit with that stuff on that first time through on the exam. So again, you want to use that knowledge area stuff as your do your create your study plan and stuff.
Yep.
I burned through that real quick. If anybody's
Wow.
got anything they want to add to that, from your own personal experience or some ideas that you have with respect to these people that are taking this exam, outside of saying that, beat your head against the wall. The reason I beat my head against the wall is because it feels so damn good when I stop.
Goofball. I was through all the links in there. I noticed a couple of your links on your website, the NCs and the CST links on your website for mentoring did not go there, but it looks like.
Oh, okay. I slapped those together real quick right before
exactly.
so I'll double check those.
Yep.
But
another opportunity for just the daily quiz would be Kyle Brook. He does Confluence land surveying. I'll throw it in there, but he does a daily exam, survey question exam, or daily survey question. He's also created a couple of 125 question exams. While I was doing a couple of searching, I found on a Reddit post somebody's Google Drive with a bunch of resources in there with a bunch of
Kyle's bunch of Kyle stuff. I was going to include his at the last minute, but his is geared more towards the PS exam, and I was kind of sticking to the FS on this.
Nope, exactly. His daily questions are so I'll throw that link in there. But Jen, I think we answered when it comes to the calculator. I think other than just don't letting the batteries die on your calculator and or changing one battery at a time. Those are the two important things when it comes to calculators.
There's that, and when you're doing statistics on, because you can do a lot of statistics with the calculator also. Before you do each statistics that you did to clear statistics registry, when you do that, you go to the clear memory option, and if you hit the wrong key on there, it'll clear your software instead of just your memories, your statistics memory. So you got to be careful on that.
Good point.
We have people doing that all the time too.
And then I don't know if any version's any better than the other for readability, Jen. They're all fun to read. So can't answer that one. Yeah, readable. So but I think that was pretty much everything in the chat. And then I just threw a bunch of the links. So
they're all readable. It's
some are drier than others. That's all.
It's not dry, it's exciting stuff.
Let's see. I'll throw a bunch of links when I post this up on the website too. So I'll throw a bunch of the stuff in there, and
I'll clean up the ones on my website and stuff. And like I say, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to contact me. I've been in education for decades, for a long time. And I've gone through so many paradigm shifts, I've got whiplash. So, I'm more than willing to help out and, and answer any questions that you have on any of the aspects of surveying, help out with the exams and stuff.
Yeah, I love it. Anybody questions? Quiet.
I either intimidated them or it's like that drinking from the fire hose thing.
I was just gonna say tonight was drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot. It is a lot, but there's tons of resources available for sure. And like Jerry's email questions there, my email, you guys get all my emails, so you're more than welcome to ask me questions. So here to help. The one thing I did note, it's actually in my presentation, but the FS and the PS exams are actually up. First time takers or overall takers is up 22%. So we're slowly making a dent in some of the numbers, but still got a long ways to go, but they're at least trending in the right way. So I was gonna see if I can find that. I did a couple of presentations with that.
And those for you who are looking for classes type of stuff, there are some resources out there also for that, for online type of things. So if you need to learn some more about some aspects of surveying, you just flat out haven't got the academic background in, there are some things that are out there that you can take advantage of.
If you want to stop, I'll share this slide that I put together real quick, and then I can.
You got it back?
Yeah. Let's see this one. So those are the FS numbers, as you can see. So we're trending in the right direction. Slowly, 61% pass rates, but up 20% from 22 to 23. So we're getting there. But long ways to go. Good
Well,
stuff.
if they quit changing the technology and crap and just freeze it, we wouldn't have to learn so much all the time.
Love it. Good stuff, Jerry. And I forgot to say at the very beginning, but it is Happy National Surveyors Week. So that is tons of stuff on social media this week. So follow all that. Post your stuff up on social media. That'd be fun. But no session next week. We got our Western Regional Conference in Las Vegas. So I'll be busy on Monday night. It actually happens to be our scholarship auction Monday night. So
is Wisdom Wednesday meeting this week or next week?
Next week. Wisdom will be on the 27th. So,
okay.
Yep. Wednesday the 27th for the next Wisdom Wednesdays, part 2 of chapter 7. So there is not so Jen just threw in the chat about active study group. And that was one of the things I was talking to Jerry about too. I almost a CST type thing. There's a couple of things in California that I post in my follow-up emails, but most of their stuff is online, in person. I'm sorry, in person, not online. I think they had 1 or 2 sessions that they did online, but I was looking to possibly start up like a CST Tuesday or CST Thursday type of situation where we did like an active study group online for some of these questions. So
yeah, and I know
it's in the works.
Yeah, and I know Facebook. I looked at Facebook and LinkedIn right before the session. I know last year there was some effort to try to get some groups going there, and they just kind of didn't have enough people signed up for it. But we could do something like that. We could do something for FS also here. I'd be able to help, mentor or monitor something like that, or help run something like that.
Yeah, it's
I'm retired, and I don't have like all this time on my hands.
Exactly. He's always looking for non-paying jobs.
Yeah, that's the difference I discovered between being retired and not retired. It's not the amount of work you're doing, but how much you're getting paid for it.
Love it. Yeah, no, if anybody's willing to do any kind of study group stuff, it's something I did want to put in together. It was initially, this whole premise of this was, for me, I created a couple of 16-week study group sessions in Nevada years ago, before our 4-year degree went into effect. And so I created 16-week study groups where we would meet, like have a whole PS section and a FS section, and then we would have maybe some sessions that overlapped. And so we would do like a joint one. But I was doing those, and they were in person in Nevada at the time. But then, of course, our 4-year degree went into effect in 2010, and that whole thing went away. And so we just didn't have the demand for that stuff anymore. But that was the original premise of how this whole Mentoring Mondays initially started, was taking my study group sessions. And so this is what happened. But go for it, Christina.
I was just going to say, Reedley College, they have they just started a survey program at night, and there is a class specifically for FS review, which she's doing the questions in Dane's workbook. It just started this semester, so maybe next semester. Yeah.
Reedley College, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
I'm on the way to it right now, actually.
Well, if anyone is interested in putting together a study group for the FS or the CST or whatever, let us know. If there's enough demand, we'll try to put something together.
And I think something similar to, I know the CFEDS has created like a 20-week program, and we could do something similar to that, where we just kind of do a 20-week program leading into somebody's exam. And maybe we just say, if you plan on taking the exam, this fall, we kind of set up a a 20-week session type of thing.
Yeah,
Break it
the
up.
toughest part, we try to do
Yeah.
something like that with the NLC prep stuff, to have
Yeah.
like evening discussion sections. The problem is everybody's work schedule is so screwed up, and
Yeah.
you know, across the it was tough coming up with a time that would work for everybody. So, but if you're committed to it, then for you say like a 10 to 16 week period,
Mm-hmm.
make that commitment to one night a week. Regardless of what's happening during the day, that time frame is spent for that, you know, to participate in the study group, and then that investment I think will pay off.
Yep, 100%. Cool. Yeah, Jen's in.
Yeah.
Jen, we haven't seen you in a while. I love it. I was looking on the Ridley's College. I didn't see anything that kind of jumped out with that, but we'll chat offline, Christina, see if we can find something on that, but that'd be cool. Sounds good. All right, everybody. I love it. Great discussion. Thanks, Jerry. I love the conversation. So have a great week, everybody. Have a good Surveyors Week. Bye, guys.
Bye.